Ithinar's Bloom by H. Jane Harrington. Chapter 19. Mercarian Jewels. Fight when you must, run when you can, wench often, and stick others with the bill. Master Kezias. Outwalk Pier 25's boathouse sat on the edge of the water, guarded by two formidable men. Kier approached, keeping Vaughn tucked close behind. A foreman met them at the dock. "Your card?" Kier handed over the ace of diamonds, and the foreman passed a spell over the ink. The diamonds sparkled in a signature pattern, then faded. "Right, this way," he said, motioning for them to follow. They entered the boathouse through a side door. The inner chamber was huge, and its high ceilings allowed for the storage of large vessels. Rows of shelves lined the substantial interior. Containers, boxes, and contraband goods were packed on the shelves, which were marked and labeled crudely. Skiffs and wagons slumbered in waiting for use. A foreman led them to a cabin of offices that lined the inner chamber of walls. Ace emerged from one. Mornin', Spade. I see the cargo is ready." "Sure as shootin'." She handed a string of coins to Ace, who pocketed it approvingly without counting it, and motioned toward a skiff. "That's your transport, love. Safe journey." Kieran Vaughn boarded the skiff, which was about as comely as a canker on a king crab. The keel was weather black, and stained where the rivets wept dusty tears, and the seats were worn to the quick. The humane streak in Kier yearned to put the pitiful thing out of its misery, but she yielded to practicality. Vaughn wrinkled his nose. "Will this thing make it to Northport?" "The capacitor and rudder look reliable enough. I've ridden in worse." Ace poked his head inside. "Helmsman's name is Skipper. You'll be departing as soon as the final passenger arrives." "Final passenger?" Kier asked. "You didn't say anything about—" Ace held up a defensive hand. "The bargain's terms didn't stipulate the amount of fellow cargo that would be packed next to yours. It only included a damage warranty. If you want a private transport, that'll cost you extra." "No, these accommodations are fine," Kier grumbled. "Excellent. Well then, fair winds." Ace doffed his hat and returned to his office. "Will this be a problem?" Vaughn lowered his voice a cautious decibel. "No," Kier assured him, patting her short sword. "No problem for me." 10 minutes later, Skipper boarded and made a brief introduction before taking his seat. He was a hard-looking man with burn scars of inferno magic that marred the side of his leathery face. He was ugly as the left ass cheek of sin, but Kier was relieved that he had a little blood on his sleeve. Should they encounter any trouble, this driver should come in handy. "Change of plan," Skipper reported. "We're picking up the other passenger in town." Kier and Vaughn exchanged silent glances. Kier sensed no deception on the driver's part, so she decided to let the scenario play out. If the other passenger turned out to be a threat, dispatching him would likely be easy. The skiff lurched forward and out the boathouse's large door, which opened just in time for them to clear it. The vehicle zoomed toward the streets of the red light district and came to a stop outside a Fleshpot. A stylish young man, his tawny brown hair bound in a high ponytail, slipped from the establishment. He entered deftly, taking the bench seat opposite Kier as the skiff lurched forward. He wore expensive, well-tailored clothes and a foppish white cloak, and his black boots were polished to a sheen. He was as pretty as a peacock and twice as sassy. When he looked up, and his violet eyes met Kier's ice-blue ones, they both started in instant recognition. "You," Kier began. This is most awkward," Ponytail said, then looked to Vaughn. "I apologize again for my earlier rudeness. I hope you were not injured." Vaughn shook his head, clearly amused by the situation. "Not at all." "My name is Thomas Skillio. That's Skill-io," the man said, putting emphasis on the pronunciation as though it mattered. He shook his white cloak away from his arm and extended a hand in greeting. "Pleasure to make your acquaintance." Vaughn accepted the handshake jovially and introduced himself simply as Vaughn. He hooked a thumb and said, "That's just Kier. She's with me." Kier glared at Skillio menacingly. She was not interested in making friends, and the less conversing they did with the dandy, the better. He'd already proven his penchant for trouble. Skillio's hand remained outstretched toward Kier for a long moment before he inspected it and wiped it on his cloak with a shrug. "So, Master Vaughn," Skillio turned his attention to the friendlier of the two passengers. "To where are you bound? Our northerly excursion does not appear to be a pleasure cruise for you either." Kier threw Vaughn a warning glance. "Heading to Northport," Vaughn said, then added cautiously, "on business, protecting our investments." Skillio threw his hands behind his head and leaned back like he owned the world. "Never was much for business myself. Mother always wanted me to become a man of enterprise, but the call of the road was too compelling to ignore. What do you do, then? Keir asked coldly. Oh, this and that. I'm something of a traveling bard, a man of the world. Masterful in my creative crafts, I do dare boast. I offer my talents to those in need. Keir sneered. Like grandmothers in need of wenching? Skillio ignored the insult. I, too, am bound for Northport. My sojourn in Southport proved rather eventful, and, like you, I have interest in protecting my Mercarian jewels. Jewels? Vaughn asked innocently. I'm afraid we don't have much in the way of valuables. Skillio laughed. I meant my treasured jewels. Vaughn stared at him blankly. Of the family kind that may end up gracing the mantle of a certain Boris should I ever again make his acquaintance? Oh! Vaughn laughed heartily through embarrassment. You're a bard? Unlike some. He threw a glance to Keir. I appreciate creative enterprise. I was a man of the theatre myself. Skillio brightened like an inferno lamp. Ah, I knew it the moment I saw you. We creatives can always sense it about another, you know. The young men traded enthusiastic tales of their thespian endeavors, comparing notes and commenting on particular plays that Keir had never heard of. Skillio told of sappy poems he had written and the various wenches he had won with them, while Vaughn listened raptly. Grumbling at the two newfound friends, Keir folded arms across her chest and turned her attention out the window. The buildings were growing scarce as they approached the outskirts of the city. Keir expected the trip to take 4 or 5 days. How long she could endure the endless jabbering about favorite roles and songs she didn't know. She only hoped she could hold out before she succumbed to the urge to kill something. They'd been on the road for several hours before they came to a market town. The roads in Mercuria were usually busy, as the island was the hub of trade in Septaria. The central location, coupled with the ideal coastal shipping ports and productive inland agriculture, meant that Mercuria was a wealthy and busy island. Unfortunately, the heavy traffic flow of skiffs and wagons on the road prevented them from traveling quickly. When they arrived at the inner market, the group consumed a quick lunch before resuming their journey. Vaughn had been careful not to flap his gums too much, but he obviously was enjoying the company. The garrulous bard rambled on about his life, happily answering every question that Vaughn asked. Keir decided that his good humor was not simply an act. Skillio truly was that annoyingly jovial. He was 21 years old, the youngest of 12 in an affluent noble Mercarian family, and he claimed to be a creative prodigy. The family holdings were managed by older siblings, leaving him free to chase his passion. Or chase skirts, more likely. While part of Keir was irked by Skillio's supreme confidence and ridiculously suave nature, another part was glad to see Vaughn sharing in a little light-hearted conversation. It was something that she had been little able to provide. He had known precious few friends in his lifetime, being uprooted so frequently. Keir hoped he did not grow too attached to the lecherous popinjay, as fate was bound to part them in a few days. After several more hours, the countryside loomed before them, and the skiff traffic from the markets had dwindled until theirs was the only skiff on the road. Skillio pulled a journal from his sack and offered it to Vaughn. You earlier mentioned your artistic endowments. Have at it, my friend. Capture for me this Mercarian resplendence. Vaughn began sketching the surrounding rolling hills, flora, and blooming cherry trees. He sketched for a spell before handing the journal back to Skillio, who gushed poetic over the work. As the skiff crested a hill, a sudden tingling sensation tickled its way down Keir's spine. It reminded her of the warning she experienced near shadow mages, but this was something deeper and more sinister. Keir scanned the horizon, her thumb flicking the hilt of her short sword to disengage it from the scabbard an inch. Vaughn noticed Keir's change in stature and tensed, gripping the hilt of his own sword. Keir, what is it? Steady, she told him. I don't see it yet. See what? Skillio asked, alert to the thickening tension in the cabin. Danger, Keir replied. If you know how to use that bow, I would ready it, Ponytail. Skipper turned his eyes from the road. You sense something? 'Cause I sure don't see... The skiff bucked suddenly, throwing the passengers to the floor. Wencher! Skipper climbed back into his seat to right the careening skiff. Where'd it come from? I don't see nothing. Keir scanned the horizon and sky. She could see no evidence of an attacker. The craft lurched again, this time with greater force. Keir whipped her sword from the sheath and threw a window open. If the attack was not coming from the sides or above, there was only one direction left. As she thrust her head out to look below, Keir almost choked on a gasp. A Kaio, nearly skiff long, was riding the air currents beneath the vessel. Its body was long and muscular, with slick grayish-yellow skin and fins that seemed designed to channel the wind. Bulging eyes protruded from the sides of its head. Although Kier had seen nothing like it, the creature reminded her of a shark on the wind. Kier leaned out, stretching over the frame. She swiped her blade toward the monstrosity, but her reach was too short. The creature bucked and rammed the hull sharply. The passengers grabbed for handholds as Skipper strapped himself securely into his seat. "Hold this for me." Kier tossed Vaughn her short sword, and he caught it deftly. "What are you doing?" "I need to pull out the big guy," she replied. Her hand found the hilt of the guardian sword strapped to her back. Steel rang in a metallic whine as she drew the blade. Leaning out the window, Kier stabbed toward the Kaio and pierced its hide shallowly above the fin. It screamed bloody hell and slammed its answer against the keel. The impact sent Kier sliding out the window. She could see the ground coming to greet her, beckoning to a grand neck-snapping party. She didn't even have time to curse or refuse the invitation.